The late afternoon sunlight painted golden streaks across the cracked asphalt of Rosie's truck stop on the edge of Maplewood, a sleepy Midwest town surrounded by endless fields. Inside the diner, the clatter of silverware and the murmur of conversation mingled with the hum of an old jukebox playing a country classic. Outside, however, the scene was set for a confrontation no one could predict. Elliot, a man in his mid-40s, steered his electric wheelchair into the parking lot. Wearing a clean flannel shirt and well-worn khakis, he had the demeanor of someone who valued quiet independence. With his neatly trimmed beard and calm, steady gaze, Elliot had the look of a man who didn't invite trouble, but trouble had a way of finding him. In the corner of the lot, a group of rough-looking bikers loitered around their dusty motorcycles. Their patched vests bore the name Steel Vultures, and their coarse laughter echoed off the diner walls. One of them, a burly man with a grizzled beard, noticed Elliot and nudged his companion, a wiry younger biker with a serpent tattoo coiled around his arm. "Look at that," the older biker sneered, jerking his thumb toward Elliot. "Fancy wheels on a guy like him. Think he's racing to happy hour." The others cackled, their voices sharp and mocking. Elliot didn't react. His focus remained on the diner's entrance as he calmly maneuvered toward it. But the bikers weren't about to let him pass unnoticed. "Hey, Speed Racer," the tattooed biker called out, stepping forward. "Where's your pit crew? Forget to bring them?" His companions howled with laughter, their tone laced with cruelty. Elliot stopped his chair just short of the diner door, his back still to the group. His hand rested lightly on the armrest as he turned his head slightly, offering the faintest of glances their way. "Afternoon," he said evenly, his voice calm but firm. He turned back toward the door, clearly uninterested in engaging further. But the bikers weren't done. "Afternoon," the leader, a man with a jagged scar across his cheek, mimicked in a mocking tone. "We're just trying to be friendly, pal. Don't be rude." Elliot's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. As he moved forward again, one of the bikers stepped in front of his path, blocking him. The tension in the air thickened as the others closed in behind him, forming a loose circle. The scarred leader leaned down slightly, his breath reeking of stale beer and bad intentions. "What's the rush? Stay and chat a while." Elliot raised his gaze to meet the man's, his expression as steady as ever. "I'm just here for a sandwich," he said quietly, his tone devoid of fear. The leader smirked, but his confidence wavered when Elliot reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He held it deliberately, his fingers dialing a number with precision. The bikers watched him warily. "Who's that?" the scarred man asked, his tone sharp with suspicion. "Calling the cops? You think they're going to save you?" Elliot didn't reply. He spoke into the phone with a few quiet words, then hung up and slid it back into his pocket. His calm demeanor seemed to unsettle the group more than any outburst could have. "What's the big idea?" the wiry biker demanded, his voice rising with frustration. "Think you can scare us off?" Elliot didn't flinch. Instead, he maneuvered his chair a few feet to the side, parking it near the diner's wall. He folded his hands in his lap and waited, a faint smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. The bikers shifted uncomfortably, their bravado starting to crack. "Man, I don't like this," one muttered under his breath. And then it happened. A distant rumble began to fill the air, faint at first, but growing louder with each passing moment. It was the unmistakable sound of engines, a lot of them. The bikers turned toward the road, their confident expressions replaced with unease. Over the hill came a convoy of motorcycles, their chrome frames glinting in the fading sunlight. The riders wore black jackets emblazoned with the name Iron Guardians, a local group known for their strong sense of community and justice. The convoy was massive, at least 30 bikes strong, and their synchronized arrival was an intimidating sight. Elliot's smirk deepened as the convoy pulled into the lot, the riders lining up with military precision. The leader of the Steel Vultures took a step back, his face pale. "Who are they?" he muttered, but deep down, he already knew. One of the Iron Guardians dismounted, a tall woman with a commanding presence. She removed her helmet, revealing sharp features and a no-nonsense expression. She approached Elliot with a nod of respect before turning to the Steel Vultures. "You boys look lost," she said coldly, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Need directions? Or were you just about to apologize to my friend here? The bikers exchanged panicked glances, their swagger evaporating in the face of the overwhelming presence surrounding them. The leader tried to stammer out a response, but his words failed him. Elliot chuckled softly, finally breaking his silence. Looks like my backup arrived. The Iron Guardians moved closer, their sheer number and unity leaving no room for argument. The Steel Vultures quickly backed away, muttering half-hearted excuses before scrambling onto their bikes and roaring off into the distance. As the last of them disappeared down the road, the woman turned back to Elliot with a knowing smile. Lunch on us? Elliot grinned. Don't mind if I do. And with that, the tension dissolved into camaraderie as the Guardians accompanied Elliot into the diner, where his quiet courage and quick thinking had made him a hero in the most unexpected way. The riders from the convoy dismounted their bikes almost in perfect synchronization, the crunch of their boots against the gravel creating a steady, unspoken rhythm. There was no shouting, no dramatic gestures, just an unmistakable aura of purpose and solidarity. The words Iron Guardians stood bold on the back of their jackets, underlined by a symbol of an unbroken chain, a silent promise of unity. The leader, a tall man with a grizzled silver beard and sharp, knowing eyes, strode toward Elliot. His steps were measured but powerful, each one commanding attention without a word. He scanned the parking lot with a quick, practiced eye before settling his gaze on Elliot. You all right? He asked, his tone calm but unyielding, a quiet strength resonating in his words. Elliot nodded once, his face composed. I am now, he replied, his voice even but edged with gratitude. The Guardian leader turned toward the group of bikers who had harassed Elliot earlier. Just moments ago, they had radiated cocky bravado, but now their swagger was gone. The leader of the group, a man with a jagged scar slicing across his cheek, stepped forward, puffing out his chest in a last-ditch effort to regain control of the situation. What's the big idea here? He barked, though his tone cracked slightly under the weight of his nerves. The Guardian leader took one step closer, his presence filling the space between them. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The idea, he said, his words deliberate and heavy, is respect. Something you clearly don't know much about. The Iron Guardians fanned out behind him in a loose formation, creating a wall of quiet authority around Elliot. Their stance spoke volumes without a single word. This man wasn't alone, and he never would be. The scarred biker glanced nervously at his crew, but none of them met his eyes. The wiry one with the serpent tattoo muttered under his breath, "We were just kidding around. Didn't mean anything by it." The Guardian leader's sharp gaze cut to him. Kidding around? His tone sharpened like steel. Picking on someone you think is vulnerable isn't a joke. It's cowardice. The words hit like a hammer, and for a moment, the parking lot was silent. The faint hum of a truck passing on the highway seemed miles away. A few onlookers from inside the diner peeked out cautiously, their faces a mix of concern and curiosity. Elliot broke the silence, his voice steady but carrying the weight of truth. You thought I was an easy target, he said, his gaze steady as it swept over the group of bikers. That's the problem with people like you. You look for weakness where there isn't any. The Guardian leader gave Elliot a small, approving nod before addressing the bikers again. Here's what's going to happen, he said, his tone brooking no argument. You're going to apologize. Right now. Then you're going to leave. And if I ever hear about you pulling a stunt like this again, we're going to have a different kind of conversation. Do you understand? The scarred biker opened his mouth to retort, but the leader's unflinching stare stopped him cold. After a long pause, he muttered, "Yeah, we're sorry." His words were begrudging, but he said them nonetheless. Elliot raised an eyebrow, his expression unimpressed. That doesn't sound like you mean it. The Guardian leader took another step forward, his presence alone making the man shrink back. Mean it, he growled, his voice low but resolute. The apology came again, louder this time, with a hint of desperation. We're sorry. For real. The rest of the group echoed his words, though their voices barely rose above whispers. Their earlier bravado was a distant memory. Elliot nodded once, his expression calm but firm. Apology accepted. But next time, remember this. You won't always know who's got someone's back. The bikers didn't linger. They scrambled onto their bikes, engines sputtering to life as they fled, their bravado replaced by urgency. The Guardians stood their ground, watching until the last bike disappeared down the highway. As the roar of the departing motorcycles faded, the Guardian leader turned back to Elliot. He extended a hand, his grip firm but respectful. "You handled that well." Elliot shook his hand, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Thanks. It's good to know some people still believe in doing the right thing." The leader gave him a solemn nod. "Always. You're not alone, brother. Don't forget that." The Guardians began mounting their bikes again, the rumble of their engines filling the air once more. This time, it wasn't a sound of tension, but one of solidarity. Their departure left an undeniable sense of power and justice lingering in the air. Elliot rolled toward the diner's entrance, the weight of the encounter falling away. As he moved inside, the waitress greeted him with a concerned smile. "Everything all right out there?" she asked, placing a comforting hand on her hip. Elliot chuckled softly. "Yeah, it's fine now. Just had a little run-in with the wrong crowd. Nothing I couldn't handle." She nodded, her smile softening. "Good to hear. Your usual?" "Please," Elliot replied, settling into his favorite booth. As he waited for his coffee, Elliot reflected on the events. The bikers thought they could intimidate him, but they didn't understand that real strength doesn't come from muscles or numbers. It comes from resilience, from knowing who you are and standing your ground. And with allies like the Iron Guardians, that strength only grew. For the first time that day, Elliot allowed himself a moment of peace. He had faced down cruelty and fear, and in the process, reminded everyone watching, including himself, that dignity and respect always win in the end. As Elliot sat in his booth, the steaming mug of coffee in front of him, he let the events of the afternoon sink in. The confrontation had started as another test of patience, one he'd faced too many times before. But today was different. Today, he had not only stood his ground, but had been reminded of the power of community. He wasn't alone, not in this fight, not in this world. The waitress brought over his plate of food, her kind smile a small but comforting gesture. "Looks like you've got some good friends out there," she said, glancing toward the now quiet parking lot. Elliot nodded. "Good people," he said simply. "They don't just talk about standing up for what's right. They show up when it matters." As he ate, snippets of conversation floated from other tables. Some diners whispered about the bikers, while others talked about the Iron Guardians and their commanding presence. Their admiration was evident, but Elliot hoped the takeaway would be more than awe. He wanted people to understand that change didn't come from just watching. It came from acting. When he finished his meal, Elliot rolled toward the counter to pay. The waitress stopped him with a wave of her hand. "It's on the house," she said with a grin. "Consider it thanks for reminding us that the good guys still win." Elliot chuckled softly, gratitude warming his chest. As he rolled out into the evening light, the horizon painted in hues of orange and pink, he took one last glance at the lot where it all unfolded. The parking lot looked ordinary again, but to him, it would forever carry the memory of standing firm against adversity and the lesson that courage and kindness, paired with solidarity, could change the narrative. The hum of the Guardians' bikes was gone now, replaced by the soft rustle of the wind. But their message remained. Strength comes not from intimidation, but from the quiet resolve to stand for what's right. Elliot smiled, knowing he'd carry that truth with him, a beacon to guide him forward, wherever the road might lead.